Okay, I suppose we are live right now. So welcome aspirants, welcome all of you to Skholar.com. This is Rohan Dange, your faculty for current affairs. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the current affairs pertaining to the last 1 week. And we are going to talk about predominantly 4 topics, which range from international relations to about economy and even internal security. I will, while our lecture is going on, at intervals of time, I will let you know which parts are suitable and which parts are relevant for prelims and which parts are relevant for mains. Okay. By the way, at the outset, let me tell you that these are amazing topics. You will have a lot of learning. You must be curious. And since this is our first lecture for current affairs, let me tell you one thing, that you must be curious about the current affairs. You must open up yourself to new possibilities. And also, you must think of it as an enriching learning exercise rather than as something which is very academic in nature. Although it is very academic in nature, it has a lot of dynamism associated with it. So I, Rohan Dange, welcome you once again on board to Skholar.com. Let's begin our session. So, let me just take a look at these things. The first topic is Quad. Okay, Quad stands for Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. Now, since we are on the topic of Quad, I want to give you a brief rejoinder. What is important from international relations point of view, or what is important from the geostrategic point of view, is the Indian Ocean and its connection with the Pacific Ocean, right? It is the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Okay. Now, the thing is that it all started with a trilateral maritime exercise. And that trilateral maritime exercise was conducted between India, Japan, and USA. And it has been going on since the last 10 to 12 years now. Okay. That trilateral maritime activity is also called as Malabar exercise. Okay, very important from prelims point of view. Once again, Malabar exercise, they can ask you. Now, what happened is that, why do you need to secure your sea lanes of communication? Sea lanes of communication are called as SLOCs. So why do you need to secure your sea lanes of communication? Is because you have various oil tankers, you have various cargo vessels which actually move between the Asian continent and the American continent, and also it connects with the African continent, the east coast of African continent. Now, समझने की बात यहाँ पे ये है कि you have to have a connection, you have to have a sea lanes of communication. और यहाँ से बहुत सारे ऑयल टैंकर्स और बहुत सारे कार्गो वेसल्स निकलते हैं, राइट? अफ्रीका की अगर आप ईस्ट कोस्ट की बात करें तो सुएज कनाल से जाके डायरेक्टली यूरोप में आपको एक्सेस मिल जाता है, राइट? मलाक्का स्ट्रेट अगर आप यहाँ पे कनेक्ट कर मलाक्का स्ट्रेट क्रॉस करते हैं तो यू आर क्रॉसिंग फ्रॉम द इंडियन ओशन इनटू द ओशनिया रीजन और द पैसिफिक रीजन, करेक्ट? सो बहुत ट्रैफिक है. What traffic are we talking about? We are talking about the traffic of cargo vessels. We are talking about the traffic of what you can say oil tankers. So there's a lot of multilateral trade which happens through this corridor, and therefore securitization of this corridor is very, very important. You have to securitize the corridor. अब आप देखेंगे कि अगर आपने ज्योग्राफी में पढ़ा होगा हॉर्न ऑफ अफ्रीका, which is basically सोमालिया, वहां पे पायरेसी का भी खतरा है. The Somali pirates actually are the ones responsible for the detainment of a lot of ships coming from Pacific region or from the Indian Ocean region, right? So you require security over there, and therefore this Malabar exercise was conducted between Japan, India, and USA, right, to securitize not only the sea lanes of communication but to also have a significant presence in the Indian Ocean. इनका Indian Ocean में रहना भी बहुत जरूरी है. किसका? United States of America, India and Japan. Why? Is because जैसे कि मैंने कहा ये एक बहुत important geostrategic location है. It's an important geostrategic location. Why is it an important geostrategic location? Is because a lot of oil tankers, a lot of cargo vessels, a lot of merchant ships, and a lot of cruise liners also cross through this. So you can see that a lot of world GDP or global GDP moves through this. A lot of people also move through this, right? And there are a lot of small island ocean nations like Madagascar, like Mauritius, like Maldives, like Seychelles, like Comoros. So all of these islands, which are also a part of Indian Ocean and even Pacific Ocean at certain instances, you have to have a connecting link between these islands. You need to securitize the assets, the ports and the jetties. And therefore, it is not only an important trading area, but this is also an important geostrategic area. और ये वही रीजन है दोस्तों जहां पे डिएगो गार्सिया नाम का आइलैंड है. This serves as the military and the naval base for United Kingdom and United States of America as well, right? Even the Reunion Islands, there you have the French possession, which is again in Indian Ocean on the African side, on the east coast of Africa, right? So what you see predominantly here is that you need to securitize your assets, correct? Now, when you talk about the Indian Ocean, it also connects to South China Sea, right? And South China Sea is a home to rare earth metals. Most of the rare earth metals which are found in the world are found in South China Sea, correct? They're found in South China Sea. So what do you understand from this? You understand that rare earth metals, which are an important element in manufacturing, are found majoritarily speaking in the South China Sea region. So आप समझ सकते हैं कि ट्रेडिंग इंपॉर्टेंस है, माइनिंग इंपॉर्टेंस है, हाइड्रोकार्बन पोटेंशियल इस रीजन का बहुत हाई है, मतलब हाइड्रोकार्बन एक्सप्लोरेशन भी हो सकता है, करेक्ट? नाउ व्हाट यू सी हियर इज दैट इतना ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट अगर ये रीजन है तो यहाँ पे सिक्योरिटी की जरूरत होगी, यहाँ पे कोलैबोरेशन की जरूरत होगी. यू विल रिक्वायर अ लॉट ऑफ कोऑपरेशन ओवर हियर, करेक्ट? ऑफ कोर्स यू विल. बट देन जब मालाबार एक्सरसाइज हुई उसके बाद हमने देखा पिछले कुछ दशकों में या पिछले दशक में, इन द लास्ट डेकेड वी हैव सीन and predominantly in the last 5 years that China has become belligerent. China has started flexing its muscle power, right? In the South China Sea, there's a territorial dispute. There is a sovereign territorial dispute which is going on in the South China Sea and elsewhere also, right? Now China has emerged as a country which is threatening the security of Indian Ocean and the Pacific and the Oceania region. And the meteoric rise of China, the stratospheric rise of China has meant that it has now started threatening not only its neighbors but nations like India, Australia and USA as well. So China as a belligerent power has now risen up in Asia, and we need to go for a strategy called as congagement. Congagement. अब ये congagement word तो आपने सुना नहीं होगा. Congagement word is a combination of containment and engagement, right? ये जैसे हम हिंदी में कहते हैं ना संधि विग्रह. अगर मैंने congagement इस वर्ड का संधि विग्रह कर दिया तो क्या होगा? Containment and engagement, correct? So on one hand you have to contain China, you have to contain the rise of China, you have to contain the belligerence of China, and on the other hand you have to engage productively and positively with China. This is the strategy which has been adopted by not only India but by other countries also, which find that China on one hand is an important country to deal with and to trade with, but on the other hand China is a very aggressive nation which can also threaten a nation's sovereign integrity, correct? So congagement के strategy में containment एक strategy होती है, containment and engagement. So जो containment की strategy की हम बात कर रहे हैं That containment strategy, my dear friends, is about containing China. Now, how do you contain China? By a concerted global effort, by a concerted collaborative effort, by a concerted cooperative effort. And therefore, an alliance has been formed. And in that alliance, India has very recently invited Australia, already under the auspices of Malabar exercise. What you have, tension started okay. So I'm sorry for a brief interruption. It was because of mostly what you see as an internet connection problem. But again, we can resume from where we had left off. So now, till now, I have explained to you the what you can say the background for what you can say the ongoing or the developing situation between India, Japan, USA, China, and so on and so forth, right? So what you can see is that there's a pressing concern, and there is a need for more and more collaboration and alliance. And that alliance is called as a quad. Okay, that alliance is called as quad. Okay, quadrilateral security dialogue. Now, with the ongoing pandemic situation, the Chinese aggression in the South China Sea and Eastern Ladakh, it provided opportunities to cooperate over maritime security, cyber security, data security, and healthcare. So it is not just about maritime security, it's also about cyber security. It's also about data security, right? Because your data you have to maintain the integrity of the data as well, right? And healthcare, because in the current developing situation, you need to securitize your borders because you don't want viruses coming from outside, right? So maritime security, cyber security, data security, and healthcare are very important. So these are the emerging threats from China, right? Now, China is of the opinion that the concept of Indo-Pacific is an encirclement strategy. जैसे कि मैंने आपको बताया, एक containment की strategy समझता है चाइना उसे, correct? अब आप यहाँ पे देखोगे that what you see is that China feels that this is an encirclement strategy, and China feels very insecure because of that. Okay, and because of this insecurity of China, what you see is that China also wants to do its or also wants to take ahead its own initiatives, and one of those initiatives is a Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, right? आपने BRI के बारे में भी सुना ही होगा, correct? So that Belt and Road Initiative is also very, very important. Okay. Now, China is trying to weaken the Quad through economic diplomacy, especially in countries like Japan and Australia. As I have told you, Japan and Australia are already a part of the dialogue process, right? So Japan has very recently started efforts to economically decouple with China. अब मेंस में आपको क्रिटिकली एनालाइज टाइप का क्वेश्चन आ जाए तो आपको इसी तरह की लैंग्वेज यूज करनी है, आपको इसी तरह की अंडरस्टैंडिंग प्रेजेंट करनी है. Decoupling with China means what? That's an important question. See, decoupling means you are actually extricating, you are separating your economy from the Chinese economy. Now, till now, what we had experienced was that there was a collaboration, or rather there was a bilateral relationship between Japan and China. But Japan, because there is a bilateral relationship, the dependency of Japan's economy is very high with the dependency of Chinese economy, right? And whenever economic stakes are involved, at that point in time, you cannot take aggressive action. You cannot take bold decisions, right? आपके अगर already economic stakes involved है तो क्या आप bold decisions ले पाएंगे? Obviously not. You cannot take bold decisions. So what has happened is that Japan has tried very consciously to decouple with China, and therefore what you can say, Japan's recent engagement, that explains Japan's recent engagement and recent closeness with Vietnam and Philippines for defense exports, right? Now, again, a similar engagement could be seen with Indonesia and China in the foreseeable future, right? So this is a developing situation, and I want you to take note of this because in the mains this will come very handy to you. Okay, now therefore this could be seen as a counter policy to China, right? Because China ka dominance ASEAN region mein kafi hai. So to reduce the eminence of China in the ASEAN region, this quadrilateral process will go a long way, right? जैसे कि हमने देखा, China is constructing a semi-permanent presence in Gwadar and Djibouti in the guise of piracy and deployment using debt trap diplomacy. Debt trap diplomacy में आपको थोड़े संक्षेप में समझा देता हूं. What is debt trap diplomacy? Okay, now when you talk about debt trap diplomacy, China is basically using a checkbook diplomacy. China will write down a check for these small nations or these economically ailing nations like Australia, like Pakistan or Sri Lanka. And then when these nations get a loan, get a very easy loan from China, what essentially happens is that they basically put that money into asset construction. जैसे ports हो गया, railways हो गया, highways हो गया. अब asset construction में perhaps there are, I mean, more often than not, because these are very poor performing economies, they do not get a return on their investment. So now can they pay back the loan taken from China, which was a very soft loan, by the way? No, they cannot pay back the loan taken from China. So now this is a debt trap. They have fallen into the debt trap. Now China will do what? To recover its money, China will take over those ports. China will take over those assets. And that is how, my dear friends, China is going to enlarge its presence in various other countries as well. Correct? So what we see here is that the Chinese are actually going in for a strategy of debt trap diplomacy. अब इसकी वजह से भी क्वाड का रहना बहुत जरूरी है. क्वाड is like a counterbalancing force to the dominance of China, right? So इस टाइप का एनालिसिस करना बहुत जरूरी है if you want to understand the justification behind the formation of Quad as an initiative. Okay. अगर मैं इंडिया की बात करूं तो इंडिया has taken the lead in banning Chinese apps very recently, and India was also instrumental in elevating the Quad dialogue to the ministerial level in 2019. Right? We have also talked about the Malabar exercise. Now Australia has also been allowed to be a part of Malabar exercise. This is a very recent development. So हो सकता है क्योंकि recent development है तो international groupings में you can get a question on Quad in next year's prelims. The prelims which is going to happen on 27th of June 2021, expect a question on Quad, or expect a question based on geography, right, related to, say, suppose South China Sea or Malacca Strait, right? Anyways, coming back to our core issue, due to the actions of China, it has led to the development of the resilient supply chain initiative by India, Japan, and Australia that has focused on key sectors like semiconductors, pharma, automobiles, and telecommunication. Correct? India is already called as the nursery, pharma nursery of the world. We are seeing the world is looking at India right now as a nation which could give an answer, which might have a answer as regards COVID-19 pandemic is concerned. India is also known for its generic drugs which are very cheap. So when you talk about healthcare, when you talk about health security, India's performance in the pharmaceutical sector is absolutely critical. And therefore, India's stakes in the global economics are also very high. And therefore, India, because of research and innovation and because of the skilled man force that we have, is also called as the pharma nursery of the world, or the pharmaceuticals nursery of the world, or the pharma capital of the world, right? So stakes काफी high है. Automobiles भी तो हम आजकल export करने लग गए. Import तो करते ही थे, right? Joint ventures में Maruti Suzuki भी है, Hero Honda भी है. Import तो करते ही थे. Renault and Mahindra भी बीच में they had gone into a joint venture. But what we see essentially is that automobiles, India automobiles को भी export करना शुरू कर दिया है. Tata Motors has also started exporting. Tata Motors already has an exposure in the form of Jaguar and Land Rover. Correct? So what you see is that there are many sectors, including semiconductors and telecommunications, where India needs to up the game. And due to the actions of China, there has to be a resilient supply chain initiative by countries which are in this region, especially India, Japan, and Australia, right? Because too much of dependence on China for semiconductors and pharmaceuticals and automobiles will mean that the Chinese will again emerge as a hegemonic power in this region and will start dictating its terms, right, as regards global economics is concerned, as regards international trade is concerned, right? So therefore, this is India's stand and this is India's position. If I talk about the way forward, then the Quad should have, देखिए मेंस में जब सवाल आता है तो आपको कंक्लूडिंग रिमार्क्स देना बहुत जरूरी होता है, and your concluding remarks should be very well in alignment with the demands of the question. और मेरा कहना ये है, expert opinion dictates that even if a way forward is not asked, in your concluding remarks, you should always give a way forward. Why? Because you're going to become an IAS officer, right? You need to have solutions at your disposal. You need to exhibit and demonstrate your ability to actually give solutions, to actually think from a solutions oriented point of view, right? So the Quad should have a tough security oriented code with an inclusive strategy that prioritizes the development agenda in the Indo-Pacific region. Okay. So now we have the Quad Plus format. The Quad Plus format is a ongoing, what you can say, development. Initially, it was called only the Quad, but now with the with Australia being a Australia joining as an active partner, you can say that the Quad Plus format should cater to the region's economic needs like infrastructure, connectivity, and capacity building. It is also suggested to convene a future Quad meeting in the 2+2 format. 2+2 dialogue के बारे में हम ज़्यादा पढ़ेंगे आगे जाके, right? Which will involve diplomats and civilian defense officials participating in it. So with this, we come to the end of our discussion on the Quad. I will be talking about these initiatives and these what you can say current affairs issues as there are more developments. The source of the current issue that we were discussing was the article in the Indian Express. Okay, now moving on. The next issue that I want to focus upon is the Northeast boundary dispute. Okay, so the Northeast boundary dispute is very much relevant from the mains general studies 2 point of view, because the general studies 2 part talks about polity, international relations, and internal security. Okay, so there have been violent clashes. अगर context की हमें बात करनी कि किस context में हम पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं, तो आप देखेंगे there have been violent clashes which have occurred between the residents of Assam and Mizoram over a disputed territory. And what has led to this dispute? According to an agreement between the governments of Assam and Mizoram, the status quo should be maintained on no man's land. Okay, so what are the operative words here? Status quo and no man's land, right? So the construction of the construction of some temporary huts by the people of Assam's Kachar Hills. Kachar Hills, please note this down. Very critical. Kachar Hills is very important. Kachar Hills could also be asked in your prelims next year. Okay. So the construction of some temporary huts by the people of Assam's Kachar Hills in those areas has broken the status quo, and the people of Mizoram have set fire on them, and that has essentially led to the problem. Now, as per the government records of Assam, the disputed area falls under the ambit of Singla Forest Reserve in Assam. So this Singla Forest Reserve also has to be understood very well, right? Singla Forest Reserve के बारे में आपको पढ़ना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि हो सकता है कि ये सवाल आपको एनवायरमेंट पे आ जाए, राइट? हम पढ़ तो रहे GS2 पॉलिटी के लिए, मगर हो सकता है कि आपको एनवायरमेंट के लिए भी आ जाए, करेक्ट? On the right, you can see a map, and on this map, you can see which are the relevant areas and which are the important areas that we are talking about. That is Karimganj, that is Hailakandi, Kachar, Aizwal, Kolasib, Mamit, right? And you can see the states of Meghalaya, Assam, Nagaland, Manipur sharing borders with Myanmar and Bangladesh, right? Now, as per the government records of Assam, the disputed area falls under the ambit of Singla Forest Reserve in Assam, and Mizoram claims that land to have been cultivated by the residents of its state since ages. So natives का claim, natives उसे claim करे क्योंकि भैया हम रहते हैं यहाँ पे, we've been staying here for a very long time. So Mizoram borders Assam's Barak Valley and Bangladesh, correct? ये भी चीज आपको ध्यान में रखनी है कि Mizoram it borders Assam's Barak Valley and Bangladesh. So civil society groups blame the illegal Bangladeshis on the Assam side for the trouble. तो ये कह रहे हैं कि भैया जो trouble है, the trouble which is coming, it is actually coming from the Assamese side. Sorry, the Bangladeshi side, right? So moving on. Now let us look at the complexity of the boundary issue. The boundary between both the states is about 165 kilometers long, dating back to the colonial era. Mizoram, which was a part of Assam, was also called as Lushai Hills. Again, a critical piece of information filtering out. Kachar Hills के बाद आपको Lushai Hills के बारे में भी जानना है. Okay. So the dispute arises from the differences in two notifications. There is actually a difference between the two notifications, which because of which there's a problem of interpretation also. Okay. Now, the notification of 1875 states that differentiated Lushai Hills from the plains of Kachar. So Lushai Hills और Kachar को separate कर दिया with the notification of 1875. And then there was again a second notification which was given out in 1933 that demarcated the boundary between Lushai Hills and Manipur, right? So दो notifications है. पहला notification it differentiates the Lushai Hills from the plains of Kachar, and then you have a second notification which came out in 1933 that demarcated the boundary between Lushai Hills and Manipur, right? Now, how do you read into this? Actually, Mizoram seeks a demarcation of the boundary based on the 1875 regulation, right? That is derived from the Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation Act 1873. Again, prelims के लिए बहुत important है, ठीक है? तो इसको जानिए. मिजोरम एक स्टेट है जो चाहता है कि जो नोटिफिकेशन 1875 का that should be implemented, that should be active, right? But the Assam government, it actually wants follow the 1933 demarcation notification, which actually demarcates the boundary between Lushai Hills and Manipur, right? So when you talk about interpretation of the boundary dispute, or when you talk about the understanding of the boundary in Mizoram and Assam, both the governments have a differring standpoint. The Mizo government actually wants to take the standpoint associated with the notification of 1875, whereas the Assamese want to take the notification into account of 1933, right? Obviously, Mizoram objects to the demarcation of the boundary as per the 1933 notification, as the civil society was not consulted in that. So basically, consensus based approach नहीं है. ऐसा मिजो गवर्नमेंट का मानना है कि कंसेंसस से तो नहीं हुआ, लोगों की सहमति से नहीं हुआ, सिविल सोसाइटी के अग्रीमेंट से नहीं हुआ, right? And therefore you see that this boundary issue, by the way, is not going to stop here. This boundary issue is going to become even more complex after this, right? So this is an ongoing issue. As this issue develops, we are going to talk more about it. As of now, I am going to move on to the next issue. So expect a question in mains on the boundary issue in next year's mains, and also in prelims expect a question on, as you can see, the Singla Forest Reserve in Assam, or the Kachar Hills, or the Lushai Hills. Correct? Moving on, let's talk about fertilizer subsidy now. This is relevant from the mains point of view, GS3 economic development, right? Very, very important. Okay. Now, just to give you a little bit of a background, Indian farmer depends a lot on fertilizer, right? Because the introduction of fertilizers, which had begun with the Green Revolution in the 1970s under the chairmanship of Professor M.S. Swaminathan, that has made the, what you can say, that has enabled the increase of per hectare yield in India. So agricultural productivity has gotten a boost with the introduction of fertilizers onto the landscape of Indian agriculture. Correct? Now, when you talk about fertilizers, can farmers buy fertilizers? Many a times, no. Why? It's because in India, predominantly a farmer is a poor person. Correct? In India, predominantly farmer is a person who is actually strapped for cash reserves. And therefore, it is a government which has to step in. It is a government which has to step in and has to provide valuable support, valuable economic support. Now, there are three types of fertilizers: NPK, nitrogen-based fertilizers, phosphorus-based fertilizers, and potassium-based fertilizers. When you talk about nitrogen-based fertilizers, you're talking about urea. Correct? So, there is a lot of reliance on government subsidy when you talk about the Indian farmer. So this is the background. Let's talk about the issue now. The government of India is planning to restrict the number of fertilizer bags that an individual farmer can buy during any cropping season. Bhaiya, prevent karna chahte कि भैया, there has to be a limit on the number of bags you can buy. Right? Limit honi chahiye ki nahi honi chahiye? Of course, limit honi chahiye. Right? So this is the objective of the government of India. Now, farmers buy fertilizers at MRP below their normal supply and demand based market rates. Correct? Like you can see the example also. For example, the maximum retail price of neem coated urea is fixed by the government at rupees 5,900 per ton, while the cost paid to the manufacturers and the importers is around 17,000 and 23,000 respectively. Right? So obviously the Indian government is fixing the price at a very low cost, at a very low rate, right? And this difference, the difference is the money paid by the center as subsidy. Farmer to 5,900 rupiya hi de raha hai, right? So who's paying the rest of the cost? Who's bearing the rest? Who's bearing the burden of the rest of the cost? It is the government of India, and that qualifies as subsidy. Okay. So that is essentially how what you understand is fertilizer subsidy. So देखिए पहले before critically analyzing any issue, you need to understand what is a subsidy in the first place, right? So the MRPs of non-urea fertilizers means fertilizers like potassium and phosphorus. I'm not talking about nitrogen-based fertilizers because those are urea-based fertilizers. We're talking about potassium and phosphorus-based fertilizers. So the MRPs of non-urea fertilizers are controlled or fixed by the companies, while the center only pays a flat per ton subsidy to ensure that they are priced at a reasonable level. इस चीज को समझ में आएगा? Let me explain this to you. The MRP of non-urea fertilizers are controlled or fixed by the companies. Companies ही जो cost है या selling price है उसे fix कर लेते. And the center, which is the government of India, it only pays a flat per ton subsidy. Okay, मतलब एक फ्लैट पर टन सब्सिडी पे कर देगी ऑन नॉन यूरिया फर्टिलाइजर, चाहे वो फॉस्फोरस बेस्ड हो या पोटेशियम बेस्ड हो, डजंट मैटर. ओके, टू एंश्योर व्हाट? टू एंश्योर दैट दे आर प्राइस्ड एट अ रीजनेबल लेवल, राइट? जब गवर्नमेंट सब्सिडी पे कर रहा है एट एक फ्लैट रेट पे, तो रीजनेबल लेवल पे आपको सब्सिडी दी जा रही है, करेक्ट? मूविंग ऑन, नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज हाउ डज द सब्सिडी प्रोसेस वर्क? नाउ इट इज बेस्ड ऑन डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट ट्रांसफर, where the subsidy payment to the companies happen only after the actual sales to the farmers by retailers. Matlab, company, for example, you can say, take an example for any company X. Once it has made the supply, once it has completed the supply to the farmer, once the farmer has already paid his or her part, then the difference amount is going to be paid in the form of direct benefit transfer. मतलब कंपनी के डायरेक्ट अकाउंट में पैसा डाला जाएगा. कौन डालेगा? गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, राइट? So this is called as direct benefit transfer. Rather than giving it to the farmer, why not directly give it to the company, right? It's one and the same thing. But when do you give it? Where subsidy payments to the company happen only after the actual sales to the farmers, right? Also, the sale of the fertilizer has to be recorded in a point of sale machine. Point of sale machine means the machine in which you swipe your card. Those are called as POS machines. And they are linked to the Department of Fertilizers through a portal. That portal is called as e-urvarak DBT portal. So companies के पास ये portal होता है. जैसे ही इस पोर्टल पे कार्ड स्वाइप हो जाएगा या कार्ड एक्टिवेट हो जाएगा, वैसे it will be linked to the Department of Fertilizers under the e-urvarak DBT portal. And then resultantly the company can claim the subsidy after the transaction has been recorded in the DBT portal. Correct? Right? So this is how the process is going to work essentially. Now, what are the challenges in this system? क्योंकि देखिए, in the exam you are going to get a critically analyzed type of a question. They are going to ask you critically analyze. In that you will have to talk about the pros and the cons as well, right? So you have to talk about the challenges as well, right? So I have listed down the challenges for you. Just take a look at them. Now since urea is being super subsidized, urea के ऊपर एक subsidy मिल रही है, but वो बहुत heavy है, बहुत ज्यादा है, तो उसे सुपर सब्सिडी कहा जाता है. Since urea is being super subsidized, it is always prone to diversion for non-agricultural uses, right? अब जब पैसा फार्मर को मिल गया है, तो because it is super subsidized, फार्मर ने ideally that money should be used for buying urea as well. But होता क्या है कि that money is diverted for non-agricultural purposes as well. Those are binder by plywood particle board markers or protein source by animal feed manufacturers उसे खरीदने के लिए, right? Or that is also used for adulteration by milk vendors, right? And also it is used for smuggling to Nepal and Bangladesh. So you can see that there is a lot of nuisance activity which is also going on because of diversion of funds. And where are the funds coming from? The funds are coming from the government in the form of what? In the form of subsidy. But are they used for the intended purpose? No. In many cases, they are not being used for the intended purpose, and therefore you will see that there's a lot of diversion which is happening. And this is especially what the government wants to tackle by bringing in a direct benefit transfer system. by bringing in the e-Urvarak DBT portal. ये याद रखना, e-Urvarak DBT portal could also be asked to you in the prelims. Okay. Moving forward. Now, why is the new step taken? So I have listed down some points for you. Currently, the center is following a no denial policy. इसका क्या मतलब हुआ? That means that non-farmers can also purchase any quantity of fertilizers through the point of sale machines. मतलब किसी को अपने deny नहीं करना. Non-farmers भी जो है, if even they want fertilizers, they can get access to those fertilizers, right? So this allows for the bulk buying by unintended beneficiaries who are not genuine or are deserving farmers. हो ये सकता है कि इस नॉन डिनायल पॉलिसी की वजह से ऐसे भी लोग खरीद रहे हैं, ऐसे भी लोग पैसे का उपयोग कर रहे हैं या सब्सिडी का उपयोग कर रहे हैं जिनको जरूरत नहीं है या जिनको फर्टिलाइजर खरीदना नहीं है, राइट? So the government of India is planning to restrict the maximum number of fertilizer bags that any person can buy during the inter kharif for the rabi cropping season. This is the most critical point. Point number 3, very very critical. Okay, right? इसी चीज के लिए to stop this particular activity or to stop this misleading or this diversion of funds, the government has decided that there has to be a cap on the maximum number of fertilizer bags that any person can buy. And this would curb the retail level diversion and the subsidy reaches the genuine farmer, right? So at least the final beneficiary will be a farmer who is actually in the need of that, right? So agriculturists also suggested that the government pay a flat per acre cash subsidy to farmers so that they can purchase any fertilizers. So इसको view forward में भी आप दे सकते हैं. हो सकता है कि आपसे पूछा जाए कि कुछ और इनोवेटिव तरीके बताइए इस डाइवर्जन को रोकने के लिए. तो एक इनोवेटिव तरीका तो ये है कि आप गवर्नमेंट एक फ्लैट पर एकड़ कैश सब्सिडी दे दे फार्मर्स को, सो दैट दे कैन परचेज एनी फर्टिलाइजर्स. ओके, सो जो इंटेंडेड बेनिफिशियरी है उसे क्या अकाउंट में डायरेक्ट पैसा जा रहा है तो वो खरीद ही लेगा, करेक्ट? सो दिस इज ऑल्सो अ वे फॉरवर्ड, राइट? दिस इज ऑल्सो एन ऑल्टरनेट व्यू that you can put forward while you are writing your answers. Okay, the amount obviously could vary depending upon the number of crops grown and the irrigation stage of land, correct? So जहां पे irrigation potential कम है वहां पे आप थोड़ा सा ज्यादा फर्टिलाइजर के लिए सब्सिडी दे दो ताकि फार्मर्स को ज्यादा फायदा हो, करेक्ट? So इस तरह there could be a variation in the amount of subsidy which is given. Now this could be a sustainable solution to prevent diversion and also encourage judicious application of fertilizers. This is exactly the kind of conclusion that you want to write in your exam. Okay, now we are done with this particular topic. Now we'll talk about a very small topic, economic cost of poor sanitation. Now sanitation is an ongoing issue in India, right? So this can also be asked in GS paper 3. Okay, according to a study conducted by Oxford University, an estimated 7 lakh people died. Can you imagine? A staggering 7 lakh people. They died prematurely as a result of poor sanitation in 2017 in India. Is that not shambolic? Is that not shameful? Of course it is. And therefore it amounts to basically 1.4% of the global death in low income countries. It accounts for 5% of deaths. Globally, it accounts for 1.4% deaths just from India. And when you talk about low income countries, 5%, which is very high, right? So in India, you see there is indoor and outdoor air pollution. There is obviously poor sanitation, poor access to water resources, and no access to hand washing facilities, right? Now that poses a big problem to basically, it's a problem of high blood pressure, high blood sugar, right? Smoking का भी एक ongoing problem है. Okay. And you obviously see that the share of deaths due to unsafe sanitation has been higher in India. Sanitation नहीं है तो water का quality भी खराब हो जाएगा, water pollution हो जाएगा, soil pollution भी हो जाएगा, और इन चीजों की वजह से it could also lead to poisoning, it could also lead to food poisoning, it could also lead to diarrhea related deaths, right? It could also lead to dysentery, correct? So these are all the things that are very pertinent, and you can see that the prevalence of this kind of malice or this kind of problem is very high in countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan as well, right? So it's a very very important issue, and therefore my dear friends, we also have something called as the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Is it not directed towards sanitation? Although not directly directed towards sanitation, but is it not talking about swachhata? Is it not talking about cleanliness? Eventually, the goal and the objective of sanitation is also achieving cleanliness, right? So you can see that flagship government programs have also been initiated to ensure complete sanitation and proper sanitation. In India, another problem is slum development and slum proliferation. Because of the expansion of slums and because of slum proliferation, what we have is a situation where there is a lot of sanitation problem in these areas, and as a result of which you see that there are a lot of sanitation related deaths. It also militates against the ability of the children to have proper nutrition. It also prevents the ability of slum dwelling population in India to actually have nutritious food, because dysentery and diarrhea will drain out all the nutrients. That's again a very, very grim scenario. That's again a very, very poor scenario. Correct. Now, what are the reasons for poor sanitation? What the reasons are? Because again, you will be asked to comment, you will be asked to discuss a topic like this. So what are the reasons for poor sanitation? A high proportion of India's population does not have access to improved sanitation, such as hygienic separation of human excreta from human contact, right? Because there's a even after the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, there are many areas in India where you see that people defecate in the open. शौच जो है वो खुले में की जाती है आज भी, and because of that there is a problem of separation of human excreta from human contact. And this also includes facilities like flush or poor flush, ventilated improved pit latrine with slab, and composting toilet. So ये कुछ technicalities है जो आपने जरूर note down करनी है अपने कॉपी में. To take the issue forward, in India only 40% of the population had access to improved sanitation, while neighboring countries such as Sri Lanka had 95% and Pakistan and Bangladesh over 60%. So you see, even our neighbors, which are relatively poor, they are also doing better. Now, what are the impact of poor sanitation? Child stunting, right? That is having a lower height for one's age. That is a sign of chronic malnutrition or undernutrition, right? The World Bank has also reported that the lack of sanitation also deteriorates economic growth. It has an impact on economic growth. In case of India, the growth deterioration is estimated at 6.4%. Right, so it's got direct impact. हो सकता है कि मेंस में सवाल आ जाए तो to correlate or find an interlinkage between poor sanitation and economic cost, right? So economic cost is premature death, an impact, a negative impact on your what you can say economy as well, right? The cost of healthcare treatment, out of pocket expenditure also goes very high for Indians. Therefore, disposable income is affected. It also comes down. Now, the World Health Organization has stated that every dollar spent on sanitation results in $9 in savings on treatment, healthcare cost, and gain from productive days. बहुत important figure है ये, $9 in savings, right? That is almost about 630 rupees, correct? So इस तरह की बातें आपको करनी है. You have to link the impact of sanitation on economic costs. So with this, we have completed our discussion on last week's current affairs. These are the hot button topics and the hot button areas. So in summary, what we have discussed Quad. We have discussed the Northeast boundary dispute. We have talked about fertilizer subsidy, and we have also spoken out about the economic cost of poor sanitation. So this is Rohan Dange signing off from Skholar.com. I'll be seeing you next week with some more topics, with some more analysis, and with a lot of engagement, right? So till the time we meet next, keep reading and keep practicing social distancing. Take care.